Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg says he is one of the 87 million users whose data were accessed by Cambridge Analytica. That scandal resulted in growing pressure for Facebook to protect users' privacy. Zuckerberg faced scrutiny in an intense two-day marathon of testimony on Capitol Hill. He spoke to members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee for 5 hours Wednesday. Here's a brief sampling of what he had to say.
It strikes me that there's a real trust gap here. This developer data issue is just one example. But why should we trust you to follow through on these promises when you have demonstrated repeatedly that you're willing to flout both your own internal policies and government oversight when the need suits you?
Congressman, respectfully, I disagree with that characterization. We've had a review process for apps for years. We've reviewed tens of thousands of apps a year and taken action against a number of them. The internet is growing in importance around the world in people's lives, and I think that it is inevitable that there will need to be some regulation. So my position is not that there should be no regulation, but I also think that you have to be careful about what regulation you put in place for a lot of the reasons that you're saying. I think a lot of times regulation, by definition, puts in place rules that a company that is larger, that has resources like ours, can easily comply with, but that might be more difficult for a smaller startup to comply with.
Now, the impact of that testimony reached Wall Street. Take a look at this. Facebook shares rose almost 1% Wednesday after a jump of 4.5% Tuesday. You can see, looking back a few weeks, a month or so, it has been down. This recent action in the past few days was the stock's biggest gain in 2 years. I want to bring in Dan Patterson. He's a senior writer for Tech Republic, and Jennifer Greigel, an assistant professor at Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications. This is all incredible, fascinating, and seismic when you look at what's really happened on Capitol Hill today. Stock is slightly up after being down, but I want to get a sense from both of you on how Zuckerberg did.
If yesterday was an A-, then today was a C+. And the reason for that is that Mr. Zuckerberg was worn down a little bit today. He also saw a broad spectrum of questions that had sometimes very little to do with data gathering and data scraping. As the Houses want to do, they asked him about all sorts of different questions in the hopes of picking up a soundbite.
And Jennifer, how do you think Zuckerberg did? There were some questions he didn't seem to know how to answer.
Sure. And I'm actually a professor, so I give a fair amount of grades, right? I'm not going to actually look at his testimony the last 2 days. I want to give him an F for the way that he has run this company.
Really?
All right? Yeah, actually. When he came out a couple days ago and said 2 billion users, all of Facebook users had their privacy exposed, that's a failure on his behalf.
Now, you had a lot of folks there on Capitol Hill grilling Zuckerberg. Democratic Congresswoman Kathy Castor of Florida pushed him on if the platform actually follows users after they've logged off. Let's listen to that exchange.
Facebook now has evolved to a place where you are tracking everyone. You are collecting data on just about everybody. Yes, we understand the Facebook users that proactively sign in are in part of that platform, but you're following Facebook users even after they log off of that platform and application. And you are collecting personal information on people who do not even have Facebook accounts. Isn't that right?
Congresswoman, I believe that
yes or no?
Congresswoman, I'm not sure I don't think that that's what we're tracking.
No, you're collecting, you have already acknowledged that you are doing that for security purposes and commercial purposes. So you're collecting data outside of Facebook. When someone goes to a website and it has the Facebook like or share, that data is being collected by Facebook, correct?
Congresswoman,
yes or no?
That's right, that we understand in order to show which of your friends.
Yeah, so for people that
like
don't even
page.
have Facebook, I don't think that the average American really understands that.
So you heard there how Mark Zuckerberg tried to rephrase and reframe what the Congresswoman was saying, but let's just clear this up. Does Facebook track us all even after we've logged off?
Yes. What Representative Castor was raising there is two technological components that the Senate missed yesterday. One is cookies. Cookies aren't inherently bad, but what cookies do is track your behavior and, in a good case, will keep you logged into a website after you've visited it, perhaps serve you targeted advertising on Amazon, for example. What cookies can also do is create a profile of you that is used for advertising purposes. There's another technological component, and that is the tracking pixel. This is a teeny little pixel that's put into the bottom corner of many websites, and in that pixel is a lot of information that is usually JavaScript, but it will follow you around and aid a cookie's profiling. Facebook uses a very sophisticated method of creating not like a traditional profile, like here's Dan with his picture and his face, but a profile of me as a consumer.
But we know about cookies, and we know that Facebook is gathering data. Jennifer, you gave Mark Zuckerberg an F. So is he just getting his hand stuck in, caught in the cookie jar, or does he really bear more responsibility to let users know specifically and in plain English what information about them is being used and sold?
Sure. What's happened here is that the cookie jar was just left wide open, and there were no regulations really in place to even stop him from eating the entire pot of cookies, right? So I think what we're starting to see now is the public is becoming educated, and we really have to give a nod to journalism here, especially over in the UK for unveiling his data practices around third-party API usage. In the case of Cambridge Analytica. If it wasn't for journalism right now, we would have no real clue that Facebook wasn't policing their content and their third-party vendors at all, essentially. We saw from Mark Zuckerberg today, he really wasn't aware of how any of this data was transferred and resold to potentially even other vendors besides Cambridge Analytica.
Now, he did acknowledge that some type of regulation within this industry is inevitable. What do you expect that regulation to look like?
Well, we know a few things about the way Facebook handles regulation, although Mr. Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg have both come forward and said, yeah, we'd really love the right type of regulation. We also know that they've worked behind the scenes to defang the Honest Ads Act, and that they have many lobbyists on K Street who are working to make sure that while there may be regulation, that regulation really doesn't cut to the core of Facebook's business model.
What do you expect any potential regulation to look like?
We're here because of Cambridge Analytica and data and privacy, but I do think one of the things that the Congress did that was really good over the last 2 days was unveil that there are a host of issues and things that we should be considering. Things from content moderation, lack of diversity within the companies, fake news, potential bias. These are all things that need to be considered.
And it's interesting you say that because the notes that Mark Zuckerberg had prepared for him yesterday were photographed, and those were some things he was prepared to respond to, but wasn't asked about. I appreciate both of you coming in once again and talking with us about this. Jennifer Greigel and Dan Patterson, thanks for your time.